My name is Leo Vance. I grew up in a place called the Grids, in the back of an old shop called the Green Root Apothecary. The apothecary was my grandfather's. He was an herbalist, a master of traditional medicine, the kind of man people from 3 counties over would come to see. I never went to a fancy medical school. Everything I know, he taught me, right there among the jars of roots and tinctures. I was identifying 100 herbs by the time I was 3, reciting the ancient texts by 5. At 10, I could diagnose a person's ailment just by the touch of a single thread on their wrist. By 15, I had mastered the 13 gates, a needle technique so precise it felt like magic. My grandfather would run his hand through my hair and sigh. "Leo," he'd say, "you were born to do this. You were just born in the wrong century." I knew what he meant. This is the age of modern medicine, of machines that go ping, of lab reports and data points and medical licenses framed on the wall. And me, all I had was a brain full of ancient knowledge and a pair of steady hands. I didn't have a license, which meant I wasn't a doctor. I was just the kid who bagged herbs at the Green Root Apothecary. This afternoon, all hell broke loose at the construction site next door. There was a deafening crash that shook the whole block. I was dozing behind the counter, and it jolted me awake. Seconds later, the air was filled with panicked shouts and the approaching scream of an ambulance siren. Man down. A piece of rebar fell. It went right through Bull. The ambulance is stuck in traffic at the intersection. What do we do? The whole neighborhood spilled into the street to see what was happening. I pushed my way through the crowd. The sight was pure chaos. A big guy in his 30s, built like a linebacker, was lying on the ground, drenched in blood. A thick, threaded steel rod had punched clean through his abdomen, from his left side straight out his back. Blood was pulsing out of the wound. His face was white as a sheet, and the groans coming from his lips were weak. He was fading fast. A few of his co-workers were kneeling around him, completely helpless, doing nothing but crying and yelling. "Everybody back off!" I roared, shoving my way through the circle. Every eye turned to me. The foreman, a guy named Mike Larson, recognized me. His eyes were shot with panic. "Leo, what are you doing here? It's dangerous, get back." I ignored him and knelt beside the injured man, whose name I now knew was Bull. "Don't move him!" The paramedics said not to move him. "It could make it worse," one of the workers shouted. "Try to stop me." I shoved his hand away, my voice ice cold. "By the time your paramedics get here, he'll be dead. If you want him to live, shut your mouths." My intensity stunned them into silence. I did a quick assessment of the injury. The rebar had pierced his torso, but by some miracle, it seemed to have missed the major arteries and organs. The most critical things now were to stop the bleeding and stabilize his heart. "Does anyone have needles?" I yelled over my shoulder. They all just stared at each other. "Who carries something like that around?" I do." A skinny kid scrambled through the crowd. It was Kevin Price, a young apprentice who'd been studying with me. He pulled a small cloth pouch from his backpack and produced an acupuncture kit. I took it without a second thought, pulling out 7 3-inch steel needles and sterilizing them with an alcohol swab in one swift motion. My hands were fluid, without a trace of hesitation. "Leo, are you sure about this? This ain't no joke." Mike Larson pleaded, his voice trembling. I didn't have time to answer him. My left hand darted across the man's abdomen, finding the pressure points around the wound. With my right, I took a deep breath. Center the energy. Let the needle find the path. The first needle went into the Tian Shu point. The second, Daheng. The third, Chihai. My hands moved like a phantom, 7 needles finding their mark in 7 major acupoints in a matter of seconds. As each one went in, the end of the needle vibrated with a faint, almost inaudible hum. The wound, which had been gushing blood moments before, slowed to a trickle, and then, miraculously, stopped completely. The crowd was dumbstruck. Jaws hung open. They were looking at me like I just performed a miracle. The bleeding stopped. My God, what? What was that? I wasn't finished. I took 2 more long needles and inserted them into the Naguan points on both of Bull's wrists. I gently twisted them, channeling a steady, warming energy into his system. Bull's pulse, which had been nearly undetectable, began to steady. A hint of color returned to his ghostly face, and his shallow breathing became stronger, more regular. "Okay, his heart is stable," I said, letting out a long breath. My forehead was slick with sweat. Just then, the ambulance finally arrived. A team of paramedics rushed in with a gurney. The lead medic, a man in glasses, saw the scene and frowned. What the hell is going on here? Who stuck all these needles in him? If you hit the wrong point, you could kill someone. He started to reach down to pull one out. Don't touch them, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. I stepped in his way. Those 7 needles are sealing the blood vessels. If you pull them now, he'll bleed out and die on the spot. When you get to the hospital, have your best surgeon ready. Pull the needles right before the operation, and you'll have less than a minute to clean and close the wound. The medic was taken aback by my authority. Then his face hardened with anger. Who are you? You're not even wearing scrubs, and you think you can tell me how to do my job? I'm not a doctor, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I'm just a guy who knows a few things. Believe me or don't. But his life is in your hands now. With that, I turned, pushed back through the silent crowd, and walked away. Behind me, I could hear the workers whispering. That Leo kid, he's something else. Yeah, he just pulled Bull back from the grave. Mike Larson ran after me and grabbed my arm, his face flushed with emotion. Leo. No, Dr. Vance, thank you. You saved Bull. You saved his whole family as soon as he's out of the woods wheel. We'll build you a damn statue. I just waved him off. It was nothing. Forget about it. I went back to the Green Root Apothecary, washed my face, and sat back down behind the counter as if nothing had happened. My grandfather taught me that a healer's heart is a compassionate one. To save a life is a duty, not a transaction. I always held those words close. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had done something right, something that honored my grandfather's memory and my own conscience. I had no idea that by saving a man's life, I had just started my own nightmare, and that the people I saved were about to teach me a lesson in human nature with a blade sharper and colder than any needle. Bull's surgery was a success. I heard the chief of surgery at City General handled it himself. They said that when he pulled out the 7 needles I'd placed, he was stunned to see the wound remain bloodless for that critical window. He couldn't stop marveling at the genius of it. With Bull out of danger, Mike Larson and a dozen guys from the crew showed up at my shop. They brought a huge custom-made plaque that read, "To a true healer, a modern-day miracle worker." Overnight, the name Leo, the miracle worker, spread through the grids. Neighbors started stopping by for me to look at their aches and pains, a sore back here, a headache there. I never charged a dime, just did my best to help. The Green Root Apothecary was bustling again, almost like it was in my grandfather's day. I felt good about it. I didn't have a license, but using my skills to help people gave me a sense of purpose. But I was celebrating too soon. Trouble came knocking. One afternoon, I was working on an older woman's sciatica when 2 men in severe suits walked into the apothecary. "Are you Leo Vance?" One of them, a man with a square jaw and no-nonsense eyes, asked. His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "I am," I said, standing up. "We're from the state medical board," he said, flashing a badge. "We've received a formal complaint alleging that you are practicing medicine without a license. We need you to come with us for questioning." My stomach dropped. Practicing without a license? It was true I didn't have one. That was my fatal flaw. But I was just helping with minor issues and never for money. How was that a legal practice? "Officers, there must be some misunderstanding," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "I just saw my neighbors out. I've never taken a single dollar." "We go by the evidence," the man said, opening a file and showing it to me. "This is a signed complaint from your patients. We also have a witness who states that after you performed a procedure at the construction site, you claimed to be a miracle worker and later collected a substantial fee." I looked at the complaint. At the bottom, a list of familiar signatures felt like poison darts stabbing my eyes. Mike Larson, Dave Smith, Bobby Jones. These were Bull's co-workers. The same men who had brought me a plaque just days ago, calling me a hero, a savior. And now, they were my accusers. My mind went blank. A buzzing sound filled my ears. "No, that's impossible. They wouldn't do that." I cried out. "The facts are right here," the agent said coldly. "Let's go." I was taken to an interrogation room at the board's office. Under the cold fluorescent lights, I came face to face with my witness, the foreman, Mike Larson. He couldn't look me in the eye. He just stared at the floor, fidgeting. "Mike, you tell them," I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "Tell them if I ever took a single cent from you." He wrung his hands, mumbling. Finally, under the stern gaze of the investigator next to him, he whispered, "You said saving a life was its own reward, but that the needles were special, made of gold, and we needed to pool together $5,000 for the materials." $5,000? Gold needles? The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I'd used my apprentice's cheap stainless steel needles. "Mike, why are you lying? Why are you doing this to me?" I shot to my feet, my eyes burning. I'm not," he stammered, shrinking back in his chair. "Sit down," the investigator barked. I collapsed back into the chair, my heart sinking into a cold, dark pit. I didn't understand. I truly didn't understand. I had saved their friend's life. Why would they turn on me? It wasn't until the next day, when my apprentice Kevin came to see me at the holding cell, his face streaked with tears, that I learned the truth. It turned out this was all the work of a DR. Albert Reed, from a fancy downtown practice called the Reed Wellness Group. This DR. Reed was a well-known holistic physician in the city, but his reputation was built more on slick marketing than actual skill. When word got out about what I had done for Bull, it made me the talk of the town and stole his spotlight. He couldn't stand it. He knew my weak spot was the lack of a license. So he went to Mike Larson and the crew. He paid them each $500 to sign the complaint. Then he made them a deal. If I was put out of business, he would provide medical care for their entire worksite at a 50% discount. $500. For $500 and a vague promise of a future discount, they didn't hesitate to sell their conscience and throw the man who had saved their friend's life onto the bus. "Leo, don't worry. I'll find a way to get you out." Kevin sobbed. I just looked at him, unable to speak. My heart had turned to ice. "Grandpa, you were wrong. A healer's heart is compassionate. Bullshit. In this world, the human heart can be more toxic than any poison. Kindness isn't met with gratitude. It's met with betrayal. With no evidence to clear my name and the undeniable fact that I had no license, the medical board came down hard. Green Root Apothecary was to be permanently closed. I was fined $20,000 and issued a lifetime ban from engaging in any activity related to medical care. I walked out of the building holding the order in my hand. The sun was bright, but I felt a chilling cold deep in my bones. Across the street, I saw them. Mike Larson and the rest of the crew were gathered around a portly man in a tailored suit, all of them nodding and smiling. The man was Dr. Reed. They saw me. First, they looked startled. Then, their faces twisted into smug, triumphant smiles. Mike Larson even had the nerve to give me a dismissive, mocking gesture. I looked at them, but I felt no anger, no sadness. My heart was already dead. I walked right up to them. They stared shocked as I stopped in front of them. I held up the order from the board, and then, looking them all in the eye, I tore it into tiny pieces. I let the confetti of my former life flutter to the ground. Then I looked at them and spoke, my voice calm and empty. "You remember this. From this day on, there's no such thing as Leo, the miracle worker. My name is Leo Vance. I don't have a license, so I'm not a doctor. Your sickness, your pain, your lives, and your deaths have nothing to do with me." I turned my back on them and walked away without a second glance. I didn't see the smiles freeze on their faces. I didn't see the flicker of coldness in Dr. Reed's eyes as he watched me go. They all thought I was just angry. They all thought, sooner or later, I'd break. They had no idea what happens when a man with a healer's heart has that heart turn to stone. Chapter 3. The sickness in Black Creek. I left the city that had broken me. I took down the sign for the Green Root Apothecary with my own hands and burned it to ash. Along with it, I burned that ridiculous notion of a healer's heart. I drifted for a while, a ghost with no destination. Eventually, I ended up in a remote town called Black Creek, tucked away in the mountains of West Virginia. It was poor and forgotten by time, but it was quiet. I rented a cheap room in a boarding house and made enough to get by doing odd jobs. I didn't touch anything related to medicine. I sealed away all those memories, wanting nothing more than to be an ordinary, unremarkable person. I thought I could just live out the rest of my days in obscurity. But you can't always get what you want. 6 months later, in the spring, a bizarre sickness swept through Black Creek without warning. It started with the workers at the local chemical plant. The symptoms were strange. It began with black spots appearing on their skin, which didn't hurt or itch. But soon the spots would grow and merge, until an entire arm or even half a body, was as black as charcoal. The terrifying part was what came next. The blackened skin would go numb, and then it would begin to rot, oozing a foul-smelling black pus. The town clinic had never seen anything like it. They were helpless. They sent patients to the county hospital, then to the city, but no one could identify the cause. Antibiotics and antiviral drugs had no effect. Panic spread through Black Creek like a plague. The plant workers fell, one after another. They were quarantined, left to watch in horror and agony as their own bodies decayed. The house I was staying in wasn't far from the plant. Every day, I could hear the tormented screams of the sick and the desperate weeping of their families. But I felt nothing. I'm not a doctor. I can't save them. One day, I was out in the yard chopping wood when my landlady, Mrs. Gable, came running out. "Leo, oh, Leo, it's my husband. He's got it. He's got that awful sickness," she cried, her face a mess of tears and snot. Her husband, Hank, was one of the old-timers of the plant. He'd always been kind to me. I frowned and lowered the axe. "Did you take him to the clinic?" "We did, Dr. Peter said there's nothing he can do. He told us. He told us to prepare for the worst." She collapsed, about to kneel in front of me. "Leo, I heard people say you used to be a brilliant doctor. Please, I'm begging you, save my Hank. I'll do anything." I stepped aside, avoiding her grasp, my voice cold. "You heard wrong. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a license. But I'm just a guy who chops wood." I cut her off. I picked up my axe and went back to my work, splitting log after log as if she wasn't there. Mrs. Gable stared at my impassive profile. Her expression shifted from pleading to disappointment, and finally to a glimmer of resentment. She stomped her foot and ran off, sobbing. My swing faltered for a second. To be honest, my heart wasn't made of stone. Not completely. Based on everything my grandfather had taught me, I was almost certain the sickness in Black Creek wasn't caused by a virus or bacteria. It was a rare form of industrial poisoning. The wastewater and fumes from the plant had to contain some unknown toxin, something that attacked the body's energy pathways and vital force. It was a poison that modern machines couldn't detect. Only the old methods, reading the pulse, acupuncture, could diagnose it and fight fire with fire. I was confident I could cure them. But why should I? So I could save them, only to have them turn on me for a few $100 and send me to jail. I've seen what people's hearts are like. I was afraid of it. I wouldn't be the fool who gets stabbed in the back again. A few days later, I was walking into town for supplies and past the clinic. A crowd of people was gathered outside, all family members of the sick. Their faces were hollowed out with exhaustion and despair. I saw Mrs. Gable, crouched by the wall, holding her head in her hands, crying silently. I walked past her without a word. Just then, a familiar voice called my name. "Leo." I turned. It was someone I never expected to see again. My old apprentice, Kevin Price. He was thinner and tanner than he'd been 6 months ago, but his eyes were bright. He was wearing a crisp new lab coat with a badge that read, City General Hospital, Intern. "Leo," he exclaimed, running over and grabbing my hand. "I finally found you." "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. "The state sent a special task force to investigate the sickness in Black Creek. I came with my department head," Kevin explained. "Leo, what is this disease? It's insane. We've tried everything, and we can't find the cause." I pulled my hand away. "I don't know. I'm not a doctor." "Leo, stop it," Kevin pleaded, his voice rising. "Look at all these people. They're dying. I know you're bitter, but you can't just let them die. This is about saving lives." "Saving lives?" I let out a cold laugh and looked at him. "Kevin, let me ask you something. When I was the one in trouble, what about my life? I saved those men, and what did they do to me?" Kevin was speechless. "I swore I would never practice medicine again," I said, glancing at the suffering patients inside the clinic without a flicker of emotion. "Whether they live or die is none of my business." I turned to leave. "Leo, wait." Kevin shouted after me. "The head of the task force is Dr. Albert Reed from the Reed Wellness Group. He's already made a public promise that he'll have a cure in 3 days. If you don't do something, not only will these people die, but he'll get all the credit and be hailed as a hero." Dr. Reed. Hearing that name, I stopped in my tracks. The hypocrite who used deceit and lies to ruin my life. He was here. I turned back to Kevin, a cold smile creeping across my lips. "Is that so? Well then, I can't wait to watch Dr. Reed work his miracles. I was curious to see, without me, could he actually handle the credit for a miracle of this magnitude? If he could, good for him. But if he couldn't, the consequences would be more than he could bear. Dr. Reed's arrival was like a shot of adrenaline for the desperate town of Black Creek. He rolled in with a team of specialists from the city and a mobile clinic with a banner plastered across the side. He immediately set up a press conference in the town square. My friends, Dr. Albert Reed boomed into a microphone, standing on a makeshift stage. I'm here on behalf of the Reed Wellness Group, and I give you my personal guarantee. Within 3 days, we will have a cure for this terrible affliction. The families of the sick clung to his words like a lifeline. They mobbed him, thanking him, praising him. Kevin found me later, his face pale with anger. Did you see that? That guy has some nerve. He doesn't know the first thing about what's happening here, and he's making these grand promises. He's going to get people killed. I sat in my yard, sipping tea, not even bothering to look up. What's the rush? Let him have his show. The higher the stage, the harder the fall. But no buts, I said, finally meeting his gaze. You're an intern from City General now, not my apprentice. Do your job and stay out of this. Kevin wanted to argue, but the cold look in my eyes made him sigh and walk away. For the next 2 days, Dr. Reed and his team turned the clinic upside down. They drew blood, ran tests, did CT scans, MRIs. They used every piece of modern medical technology at their disposal. And the conclusion they came to was, nothing was wrong. Other than the visible skin decay, every single one of the patient's vitals and blood panels were completely normal. Dr. Reed was stumped. The promise he'd shouted from the rooftops was about to come crashing down on his head. The townspeople started getting restless. They crowded the clinic every day, demanding answers. Just as Dr. Reed was about to be exposed as a fraud, on the 3rd day, he actually produced a so-called miracle cure. It was a thick black ointment with a pungent chemical smell. Dr. Reed claimed it was a secret formula he'd rediscovered in an ancient text and synthesized with modern technology. He called it Rejuviderm. Friends, the miracle is here, Reed announced, holding up a jar of the ointment like a snake oil salesman. Apply this directly to the afflicted area. You'll see improvement in 1 day and a full recovery in 3. The families were skeptical. To prove its efficacy, Reed found the patient with the most advanced symptoms and applied the ointment himself in front of everyone. And a miracle happened. As soon as the black paste touched the man's rotting skin, the oozing stopped. The charcoal black flesh began to visibly lighten, revealing pink, new skin underneath. It's working. It's really working. Dr. Reed, you're a savior. The crowd erupted. A frantic rush began as people scrambled to buy Dr. Reed's miracle cure. He was selling a small jar for $1,000. But to save their loved ones, people emptied their life savings without a second thought. Even Kevin was stunned. He ran to my place, his face a mask of disbelief. Leo, how is this possible? Is that guy? Is he actually for real? I put down my teacup and walked to the gate, watching the frenzy at the clinic from a distance. I could smell the faint, acrid scent of the ointment on the wind, and a cold sneer formed on my lips. For real, he's a fraud, through and through. Then what's in that ointment? If I'm not mistaken, he's mixed in a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin, something like a synthesized venom. I said calmly. What? Venom? Kevin was horrified. That's a deadly poison. How can that be a cure? Using a poison to fight a poison is the right idea, I explained. But the one he's using is extremely aggressive. It doesn't cure anything. It just violently suppresses the symptoms, creating the illusion of healing. In reality, the two toxins are now at war inside the body, which will only accelerate the destruction of the patient's internal organs. Within 7 days, every single person who used that ointment will die of catastrophic heart failure, and it will be a far more gruesome death than what they're facing now. A chill ran down Kevin's spine. Then, we have to go expose him. We have to stop him before he kills more people. Expose him with what? I shot back. Do you have proof? Right now, they see him as a god. If we run out there yelling that his miracle cure is actually a poison, who do you think they're going to believe? Kevin fell silent. He was right. Dr. Reed was a celebrated hero. I was just a disgraced outcast with no license. No one would listen to me. So we're just going to stand here and watch all these people die. Kevin's voice cracked. I looked at him, my gaze hardening. Kevin, you have to learn something. We can treat a disease, but we can't treat a person's fate. Some people, they make their own fate. Not even God can save them from that. I turned, went back into my yard, and shut the gate. I watched through a crack in the wooden planks as people celebrated, delirious with joy over the miracle cure. I felt not a shred of pity. Not long ago, in another city, people just like them chose to destroy a man's life for $500. Now, these people were choosing to leap into the fire for a sliver of false hope. Foolish and greedy. People like that didn't deserve to be saved. So, Dr. Reed, you want to be the hero? Fine. I'll let you. I'm just waiting to see what happens in 7 days, when your miracle cure turns into a death sentence. When the very people who put you on a pedestal turn into vengeful ghosts demanding your head. Let's see how you handle that. For the next few days, Black Creek was in a state of euphoria. Stories of Dr. Reed's Rejuviderm spread like wildfire. Every patient in town was showing signs of a miraculous recovery. Dr. Reed became the savior of Black Creek. The mayor gave him the key to the town. A news crew from the city came to interview him. He stood before the cameras, beaming, and spoke at length about his compassion as a doctor and his brilliant medical innovations, elevating the reputation of the Reed Wellness Group to new heights. He even had one of his assistants deliver a letter to me. Inside, his arrogant scrawl filled the page with mockery. Leo, do you see now? This is the difference between having a license and not. What good is all your talent if you're forced to hide in the shadows like a stray dog? I am the one who stands in the light, adored by the masses. I am the true healer. I read the letter and tossed it into the wood stove. The flames licked at the paper, their flickering light dancing on my cold, impassive face. On the 7th day, the bill came due. At dawn, a blood-curdling scream shattered the morning calm. On the east side of town, the first patient to use the miracle cure was dead. His death was horrific. His skin had turned a morbid shade of purple, and he was bleeding from his eyes, nose, and mouth. His body was contorted, as if he had died in unimaginable agony. Then came the second death, and the third. It was like a series of precisely timed bombs going off all over town. Every single patient who had used Dr. Reed's ointment died on the 7th day, in the exact same gruesome way. The euphoria vanished in an instant, replaced by a panic far deeper than before. Despair, absolute and suffocating, fell over Black Creek. The miracle cure was a death sentence. Dr. Miracle Worker was a mass murderer. Enraged, grieving families stormed the clinic, a mob screaming for Dr. Reed's blood, but the clinic was empty. The clever hypocrite had seen this coming. Sometime in the middle of the night, he and his team had packed up their bags, along with the fortune they'd made selling the ointment, and vanished without a trace. He was gone, but he'd left a graveyard behind. Black Creek had become a city of the dead. The town hall was in chaos. The state task force was powerless. As everyone drowned in despair, they finally remembered me. They remembered the unlicensed doctor they had forgotten in the corner. That afternoon, it sounded like someone was trying to tear my front gate off its hinges. The mayor, the clinic doctor, and a massive crowd of townspeople, many wearing black for their dead, had surrounded my little house. Leo, please. We're begging you, save us. We were wrong. We know we were wrong. We shouldn't have trusted that snake oil salesman Reed. We'll get on our knees to you. If you can just help us, we'll owe you our lives. They were crying and pleading, their faces streaked with cheap, tear-soft remorse. I opened the gate and looked at them in silence. My eyes scanned the crowd, moving from one face to the next. I saw my landlady, Mrs. Gable. Her husband was gone. I saw the local clinic doctor. In his attempt to curry favor with Dr. Reed, he'd recommended the cure to his own relatives. Now he had their blood on his hands. And then I saw a few faces I recognized from my past. It was Mike Larson and the construction crew who had betrayed me for $500. I had no idea what they were doing here. Maybe they'd followed Dr. Reed, hoping to get another piece of the action. But instead of a payday, they'd found the plague. Now, they were kneeling in the dirt with the rest of them, bowing their heads to me, the man they had personally destroyed. The irony was thick enough to choke on. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice as still and dead as a winter pond. "Leo, we were wrong." Mike Larson looked up. Black spots were already blooming on his arm. Tears streamed down his face. "We were fools, blinded by that bastard Reed's money. Please, have mercy on us. Give us another chance." "Yeah, Leo, have some pity on us. Whatever you want. Money, anything, it's yours." They sobbed, confessing their sins. 6 months ago, I might have been moved. My heart might have softened. But that heart was now harder than iron. I looked down at them and smiled. "You're sorry now? It's too late. Back then, you sold your conscience for $500. Today, you're on your knees begging for your lives. What about tomorrow? If someone offered you $1,000 to stick a knife in my back, would you hesitate?" My words were a blade, twisting in each of their hearts. They were silent, their faces shifting from pale to red. "I told you before, I don't have a license. I'm not a doctor," I said, my voice dropping to a low, deliberate tone. "What does your life or death have to do with me?" With that, I slammed the gate shut with a deafening bang. I shut out all the cries and pleas. I leaned against the heavy wood, listening as their begging slowly curdled into curses. "Leo, you heartless bastard. You're just going to watch us die. You'll pay for this. You'll get what's coming to you. We'll haunt you from our graves." I closed my eyes, my expression unchanging. What's coming to me? What's happening to you today is what was coming to you. As for me, I've already paid my dues. Chapter 6, The Chains of Morality. I closed the gate, but it wasn't over. The situation in Black Creek had exploded into a full-blown catastrophe. The deaths of nearly 100 people in a single day wasn't just a medical incident. It was a national scandal. The state sent in a higher-level investigative team and put the entire town under quarantine. Dr. Reed was declared a fugitive, and a nationwide manhunt was underway. But none of that solved the immediate problem. There were still over 100 people in town who had used the miracle cure but hadn't reached the 7-day mark. They were all walking time bombs, and everyone knew there was only one person who might be able to save them. That's when a next wave of moral blackmail began. This time, it was official. A state official, a man with an air of authority, came to my little house with his entourage. He didn't beg or plead like the townspeople. He took a more official tack, launching into a lecture about civic duty. "Mr. Vance, I understand you've been wronged, and the state will conduct a full review of your case to ensure justice is served," he declared, standing in my yard. "However, these are extraordinary circumstances. The lives of the people are our highest priority. I expect you to put your personal grievances aside for the greater good and intervene immediately. It is your responsibility, your duty." He spoke with performative passion, as if my refusal would make me a traitor to humanity itself. I sat in my chair, poured him a cup of tea, and listened quietly until he was finished. Then I smiled. "Are you done, sir?" The official paused, taken aback. "If you're done, please have some tea," I said, pushing the cup toward him. "And then, please leave." What is this attitude?" The man's face hardened. "Leo Vance, don't push your luck. Do you have any idea how easy it would be for me to have you arrested for endangering public safety?" "I do." I nodded, my eyes meeting his without a trace of fear. "You can arrest me. You can have me executed. But my answer is the same. I don't have a license. I'm not a doctor, and I will not save them. You." The official was so angry he was shaking, pointing a finger at me, speechless. "Sir, let me ask you a question," I said, my voice low and steady. 6 months ago, when I was arrested for practicing without a license, fined, and had my family's apothecary shut down, where were you? When those men sold their integrity for $500 and slandered my name, where was your justice? Now, people are dead. You have a crisis you can't handle, and suddenly you remember me? You come here and lecture me about responsibility and the greater good. My voice wasn't loud, but every word was a slap across his face. "I'm sorry, but my sense of responsibility was torn up and thrown away 6 months ago. And my vision of the greater good now extends only as far as my own front gate. This is your mess. You clean it up. Don't come asking for help from an unlicensed, fake doctor." The official's face was purple with rage. He slammed his hand on the table. "Insolence. Leo Vance, you are defying the government. You are defying the people. I am defying a system run by hypocrites like you, I said, rising to my feet, my presence suddenly more imposing than his. And don't you dare use the people to threaten me. It was the people who sent me to jail in the first place. He was out of arguments. He knew that appealing to my sense of duty was a lost cause. He stormed out of my yard, throwing one last threat over his shoulder. Leo Vance, you'll regret this. Regret? I already have regrets. My only regret is that I was ever weak enough to save those vipers in the first place. When official pressure failed, they tried a new tactic. The next day, a fleet of news vans rolled into Black Creek. Cameras and microphones were aimed at my small, dilapidated house. A reporter with a polished smile stood at my gate and began her live broadcast. Good evening. I'm standing in Black Creek, the site of an unimaginable tragedy involving a fraudulent medication. Yet, in this town shrouded in despair, we've learned there is a reclusive healer who may hold the only cure. However, for reasons of his own, this man has refused to help, choosing instead to stand by and watch his lives are extinguished before his very eyes. A healer's duty is to heal. We don't know what personal grudge could lead to such cold indifference. Today, we're going to try and understand the man they're calling the Doctor of Last Rites. They were trying to break me with public opinion. They painted me as a cold-blooded, selfish monster. Online, an army of keyboard warriors who knew nothing about the situation began their assault. He calls himself a healer? He's human garbage. They should charge him with negligent homicide. He's just trying to jack up his price, profiteering from a disaster. In the court of public opinion, I was already convicted. Kevin showed me the articles on his phone, trembling with rage. Leo, this is insane. They're twisting everything. It's all lies. I scrolled through the venomous comments, my face a blank slate. Let them talk. Their mouths are their own. They can say whatever they want. If insults could solve the world's problems, we wouldn't need fists. I kept to my routine. I chopped wood. I drank tea. I lived my life. Let the storm rage outside. Let the world condemn me. I stood unmoved. The chains of morality, the pressure of public opinion, those things can only bind someone who cares about their reputation. I was a man whose heart was already dead. What did I care for such meaningless things? All I wanted was to watch the people who wronged me pay the ultimate price for what they had done. Chapter 7. Justice and Kindness. The media's siege lasted for days, but I was impenetrable. Eventually, they realized they were out of options. You can't legally compel a private citizen to perform a medical procedure. They couldn't touch me. But just when everyone was convinced I would let the whole town die, I made an exception. I saved one person. She was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Her name was Mia. Her parents had both worked at the chemical plant. They were among the first to get sick and among the first to use DR. Reed's miracle cure. They were both dead. Mia was an orphan. She had the sickness, too. The black spots were already spreading across her hands. But she was a tough, quiet kid. After her parents died, she didn't cry. She just stayed in her empty house, surviving on the scraps of food the neighbors left on her porch. She'd never gone to the clinic or used DR. Reed's ointment. She didn't have the money. And because of that, the toxin in her system hadn't been accelerated by the venom. Of all the sick people left in town, her condition was the most treatable. One day, I stepped outside and saw her huddled in a corner by my gate. Her face was flushed with fever, and she was shivering uncontrollably. The spots on her hands had started to break open and weep. She was on the verge of death. I stood there for a long time, watching her. A war was raging inside me. Do I save her or not? If I helped her, all of my defiant resolve would become a joke. The townspeople would say, see, he does have a heart. If we just push a little harder, he'll save us too. This one exception would open the floodgates to a world of trouble. But if I didn't, I looked at Mia's pale, small face. She was an innocent victim in all of this. Her parents may have been foolish, but they didn't deserve to die. And she certainly didn't deserve to pay for the mistakes of adults. My grandfather's words about a healer's heart might not apply to the vipers who betrayed me. But could I really turn my back on a guiltless child? I couldn't. My heart hadn't turned completely to stone. With a heavy sigh, I walked over, lifted the unconscious girl into my arms, and carried her into my house. The news that I had saved Mia spread through Black Creek like a shockwave. Everyone was stunned. That shock quickly turned to ecstatic relief. He did it. He's finally willing to help. Thank God, we're saved. The mayor and a crowd of people swarmed my gate once again. This time, they were emboldened. Leo, if you're willing to save that little girl, it proves you're not completely heartless. Now that you've saved her, you have to save the rest of us. If you don't, you're a hypocrite. It's not fair. That's right. You can't just save one. Our lives are worth just as much as hers. They had found a new moral high ground from which to attack me. I didn't open the gate. I was called out from behind the wall, my voice cold and sharp. I saved her because she's innocent. Do you really think you can compare yourselves to her? If you want my help, fine. I interrupted, my voice low and deliberate. Go find the man who paid you $500 to slander me. Go find the man who sold you fake medicine. You bring DR. Read to me, and I'll consider giving you the antidote. My words stunned them into silence. Find DR. Reed? He was a wanted fugitive. He could be anywhere in the country. Leo, you're asking for the impossible, the mayor yelled, his voice cracking with frustration. Yes, I am, I replied calmly. Back then, you had no problem selling me out for $500. Now, to save your own lives, I'm asking you to find the man responsible for all this. And suddenly it's too difficult. Tell me, are your lives not even worth $500? Outside my gate, a dead silence fell once more. I ignored them and focused on treating Mia. I used my needles to halt the spread of the toxin in her body, then went into the hills behind my house to gather herbs. I brewed a dark, bitter tea and carefully fed it to her, bit by bit. My little yard was filled with the rich scent of medicine. Outside the gate, there was only the sound of desperate wailing. For the patients who had used the miracle cure, the poison was now running its course. Their bodies were breaking down, rotting away. The stench of decay was overwhelming. They were living in a true hell on earth. And I was just on the other side of the wall. On this side, there was life. On that side, there was death. Kevin came to visit. He looked at Mia, sleeping peacefully, then listened to the horrifying screams from outside. His expression was conflicted. Leo, I used to not understand why you became so cold, he said quietly. But now I think I'm starting to get it. He pulled a worn book from his coat pocket and handed it to me. I found this at a used bookstore. I thought you might appreciate it. It was a faded copy of the Analects of Confucius. I opened it to a random page, and a line seemed to jump out at me. Someone asked, "What do you think of repaying grievance with kindness?" The master said, "Then with what would you repay kindness? Repay grievance with justice, and repay kindness with kindness." I stared at the words for a long time. He was right. Repay grievance with kindness? Then how do you reward good deeds? Saving Mia was repaying a debt to kindness, to innocence. Letting those others die was repaying a grievance with justice. Perhaps that was the only code that made sense in a world like this. I closed the book and looked at Kevin with a faint smile. Remember this, Kevin. When you practice, you have to treat the person, not just the disease. For the good people, you give them everything you have. That is the healer's heart. But for the wicked, you must have a will of iron. A just man doesn't save everyone. He distinguishes between good and evil. A kind man shows mercy, but only to those who deserve it. I'm not a saint, Kevin, and I'm no paragon of justice. I'm just an ordinary man, trying to follow my conscience. Kevin nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. After he left, I looked out the window at the figures writhing in despair. My heart was calm. Your time is up. Get ready to pay the final price for your own stupidity and greed. Chapter 8. A price I won't accept. Under my care, Mia got better every day. The black spots on her hands faded, revealing healthy, new skin. Her energy returned, and the light came back to her eyes. Outside my gate, however, things were getting worse. The shadow of death hung over everyone. They finally understood that waiting for me to have a change of heart was a losing game. So they turned to the one thing they believed could solve any problem: money. The first to try was Warren Price, the wealthiest man in town. He owned the mining operations, and money was no object. His entire family had used DR. Reed's ointment. He sent his men to my house with several large trunks. They opened them right at my gate. Inside, stacks of brand new $100 bills were packed in neat bricks. There were also gold bars, jewelry, and the deeds to several properties. Dr. Vance, Price's head of security, shouted toward my house. My boss says if you're willing to save his family, all of this is yours, and this is just the down payment. There will be much more when the job is done. The glittering treasure was blinding. A collective gasp went through the crowd of onlookers. How much was there? Medium. Tens of millions. Everyone stared at my gate, holding their breath. Surely, this would be enough. No one on earth could turn down a fortune like that. I opened the gate. I walked over to the open trunks and glanced inside. Then I smiled. I reached in and casually picked up a stack of cash and a single gold bar. A wave of relief washed over the crowd. He was taking it. They were going to be saved. But what I did next made every jaw drop. I walked over to Mia, who was playing in the dirt by the gate. Mia, look, I said softly. This is money. You can buy lots and lots of candy with it. And this is gold. Isn't it pretty and shiny? I put the cash and the gold bar in her small hands. Mia played with them for a moment. Then, bored, she tossed them aside and picked up a smooth, gray stone, continuing to draw pictures of houses and people in the dust. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my hands, and looked at the stunned security chief. Did you see that? I asked, my voice calm. In my eyes, all of your money in gold is no different from that stone on the ground. I saved Mia not for what she could give me, but because her life is cleaner than your filthy money. Go back and tell your boss to save his fortune. He'll need it to buy himself a nice coffin. Without another glance, I turned, walked back inside, and closed the gate. There was a dead silence. The security chief's face went pale, then red. Defeated, he ordered his men to take the trunks and leave. If even Warren Price's millions couldn't move me, the others fell into total despair. They began to resort to more desperate measures. Some tried to scale the wall of my yard to kidnap me and force me to treat them. They were met by a massive, snarling black dog that seemed to have appeared from nowhere and left with shredded limbs. Others tried theatrics, wailing at my gate, claiming they were possessed by vengeful spirits who would drag me to hell with them. They were met with a bucket of scalding hot herbal dregs to the face. Then, someone had a more vicious idea. If they couldn't get to me, they would go after the people I cared about. Their target was Kevin. They figured he was my apprentice. If they had him, they could force my hand. That evening, as Kevin was leaving the clinic, he was cornered in an alley by a mob of red-eyed patients. Leading them was Mike Larson. The disease had ravaged him. Half of his face was black and decaying, and one of his eyes was a rotting socket. He looked like a demon clawed up from the depths of hell. Grab him, Larson rasped, pointing a trembling finger at Kevin. I bet he won't ignore his own apprentice's life. The mob descended on Kevin like a pack of wolves. He knew a little self-defense, but he was no match for a dozen desperate men. They quickly overpowered him, pinning him to the ground and beating him. Just as they were about to tie him up, a voice cut through the alley, cold as a winter wind. Stop! It was me. I emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. My hands were empty, but my eyes were colder than a Siberian winter. Every man who met my gaze froze, an involuntary shiver running down their spine. Leo, Mike Larson stammered, his voice shaking. Let him go, I said, my voice flat. No, no way. Larson found a sliver of courage. He pulled a rusty knife from his belt and pressed it to Kevin's throat. Leo, if you don't want him to die, you'll come with us, nice and quiet. He thought he had found my one weakness. He was wrong. I looked at him and smiled. It was a terrifying sight. You know, Mike, I said conversationally, the one thing I can't stand is being threatened. I was going to let you all suffer for a few more days. But now, I don't think that's necessary. Before the last word left my mouth, I moved. I wasn't. There 1 second, and the next I was right in front of him. Larson's eyes widened. A hand like an iron vise clamped down on his wrist. Crack! The sound of bones snapping echoed in the narrow alley. Larson let out a scream like a slaughtered pig, and the knife clattered to the ground. I snatched it out of the air, reversed my grip, and pressed the cold, rusty blade against his own throat. It was fast. Too fast. So fast no one had time to react. The tables had turned in a single heartbeat. I held the knife to Larson's neck and scanned the faces of the other men. who were paralyzed with fear. "Now," I said, my voice a low growl, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can run, or you can die." Chapter 9. Deathbed Confessions. My eyes were devoid of any emotion. In my hand, the rusty knife felt as deadly as a surgeon's scalpel. One twitch, and Mike Larson's throat would be cut. The raw, primal fear of death washed over every man in the alley. They were no longer looking at a healer. They were looking at an executioner. "Get out," I snarled. It was as if they'd been granted a pardon. They scrambled over each other to flee, a panicked herd of animals. In moments, the alley was empty except for me, Kevin, and the quivering wreck that was Mike Larson. "Leo, Dr. Vance, I was wrong. I was so wrong." Larson was sobbing, a foul stench rising from his pants as he lost control of his bladder. "Please forgive me. I'll never do it again. I'm not a man. I'm an animal. Please think of my family. Give me one more chance to make it right." He slammed his forehead against the grimy pavement again and again. Kevin, watching from the side, looked at him with pure contempt. "A little late for that, isn't it?" I looked down at the pathetic man at my feet, my expression unreadable. "A chance?" I let out a cold, humorless laugh. "I gave you all a chance. You're the ones who threw it away." I released him, shoving him to the ground like a sack of garbage. "Get out of here. Go back and tell the others. 3 days. I'm giving you 3 days. You find Dr. Reed and bring him to me. If you don't, every single person who was involved in framing me can prepare to join him in hell." Larson scrambled away as if the devil himself was on his heels. Kevin got to his feet, dusting himself off. He came to my side, his voice filled with concern. "Leo, are you really going to save them?" "Save them?" I shook my head. "No, I'm just setting the stage for a dog-eat-dog show. To save their own skins, they'll hunt Reed to the ends of the earth. And when they finally drag him back here, that's when their time will be up." My voice was terrifyingly calm. Kevin shivered. He knew, in that moment, that the compassionate healer he once knew as his mentor was gone for good. For the next 3 days, a strange, frantic energy consumed Black Creek. The sick townspeople who had wronged me, driven by the primal instinct to survive, unleashed an incredible effort to find Dr. Reed. They called in favors, posted huge cash rewards online, and even formed vigilante groups to track him down. And they actually found him. It turned out Reed hadn't fled far. Thinking the place no one would look was right under their noses, he'd been hiding out at a mistress's apartment in the next city over. On the evening of the 3rd day, a battered, bruised man who looked more like a stray dog than a respected doctor was dragged to my gate. It was Albert Reed. In their desperation to capture him, Larson and his crew had paid a heavy price. Several of them had been killed in the struggle, but they had succeeded. They brought him to me. "Leo, Dr. Vance," Larson gasped, pointing at the pathetic figure of Dr. Reed on the ground. A sliver of hope flickered in his dying eyes. We brought him. Can you give us the antidote now?" I stepped out of my yard and glanced at Reed. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and pure hatred. "Vance, you'll burn for this," he mumbled through a split lip. I ignored him. My gaze swept over Mike Larson and the few remaining men from his crew. The disease was in its final stage. Their bodies were decaying, the stench of death thick around them. Their life force was all but extinguished. Even if I wanted to, there was nothing I could do now. I looked at them and slowly shook my head. "It's too late." "What?" The hopeful smile on Larson's face froze. I said, "It's too late." I repeated, my voice flat. "The 2 poisons have completely destroyed your internal organs. Not even God can save you now." "No, that's impossible," Larson shrieked, his voice a raw, broken thing. "You promised us. You promised." I said I would consider it. I corrected him calmly. "And now I have. My answer is no. You tricked us." Larson's eyes turned blood red. With a feral roar, he lunged at me. "I'll take you with me." He wanted to die taking me down, but he only made it 2 steps before his body went rigid. He froze, then fell forward, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. His eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief, regret, and an infinite, bitter despair. He was dead. One by one, the men behind him collapsed, their bodies giving out at the exact same moment, as if on a timer. Their lives had run out. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows from their twisted corpses. The feud that had started with $500 had finally ended in a pile of bodies. I looked at them, but I felt nothing. I turned my attention to the man still on the ground, the man who was now paralyzed with a new kind of terror. Dr. Reed. Now, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. It's your turn. Chapter 10. Just an ordinary man night fell. A bonfire crackled in the center of my yard. Dr. Reed was tied to a thick wooden post in the middle of it all, his face a mask of pure terror. Vance, what are you going to do? Killing me is a crime, he screamed, his voice hoarse. A crime. I sat by the fire, a small carving knife in my hand, slowly sharpening a piece of wood into a fine point. When you paid those men to slander me, to destroy my apothecary, to ruin my life, you weren't worried about the law then, were you? When you used a fake cure to kill 100 people in this town, was the law on your mind? I looked up at him and smiled. Don't worry, Albert. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. I stood and walked over to him, holding up the freshly carved, needle-thin piece of wood. You're a doctor, aren't you? I mused. You appreciate medical techniques. Well, tonight, I'm going to give you a private demonstration of my family's specialty. It's called the 13 Gates. The 13 Gates. The technique my grandfather taught me. It could pull a man back from the brink of death, or it could make him wish for a death that would never come. The first gate, the Rinjong point. This will make it so you can't speak, can't even move your tongue. A move like a flash of lightning, pressing the wooden needle into the acupoint below his nose. Dr. Reed's frantic curses stopped instantly. His mouth hung open, but all that came out were muffled, terrified whimpers. The second gate, Shaoshong. This will sever the connection between mind and muscle, sending a pain so deep it feels like your bones are on fire. The third gate, Yinbai. This will paralyze your limbs, but fill them with the sensation of 1,000,000 fire ants crawling under your skin. I went on, point by point. Each one was precise, deliberate. Dr. Reed's body began to convulse violently. Veins bulged on his forehead, his eyes rolled back in his head, and a mixture of sweat, tears, and mucus streamed down his face. He was experiencing the most exquisite agony a human being can endure. He couldn't pass out. He couldn't die. His will was being systematically dismantled by pure, unending pain. Finally, when I was done, his eyes found mine, and they were filled with nothing but a desperate, silent plea. He was broken. I removed the wooden needles and watched him collapse to the ground, a boneless heap of flesh. From this day on, you will be a living ghost, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Your mind will be perfectly clear, trapped inside a body that will never again obey you. You will lie in a bed, unable to move, unable to speak, until you die of old age. This is the price you pay. I untied him, dragged his unresponsive body out of my yard, and left him in the street for someone else to find. When it was done, I went back inside and washed my hands. I felt a profound sense of release, a quiet calm I hadn't known in a long time. The debts were paid. The accounts were settled. The next morning, I packed my few belongings. Holding Mia's hand, I prepared to leave Black Creek for good. Kevin came to see us off. Leo, what will you do now? He asked, his eyes red. I don't know, I said, looking toward the rising sun. I smiled. Maybe find a quiet place, somewhere with clean water and tall trees. Open a little workshop, make things out of wood. Live a simple life. And all your skill, all this knowledge, it's forgotten. I cut him off. The world doesn't need a miracle worker. It'll be fine, but there will always be innocent people like Mia. Then it's up to you, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. Kevin, remember this. To be a good doctor, you first have to be a good person. Have a compassionate heart, but also have a will of iron. Don't be like me, but don't become the kind of person I've come to hate. He looked at me, a new understanding dawning in his eyes, and nodded firmly. I took Mia's hand, and we walked down the main street of the town. White mourning cloths hung from every door. The survivors watched us go, their expressions numb. In their eyes, I saw fear and awe, but the resentment and entitlement were gone. They had finally learned to have respect for life. The price of that lesson had been devastating. At the edge of town, I paused and looked back one last time at the community shrouded in death. Then, without turning back again, I walked toward the morning sun. The world no longer had a miracle worker who could cheat death. It just had a quiet carpenter starting a new life. People might ask me if I have any regrets. I just smile. I don't have a license. I'm not a doctor. I'm just an ordinary man, trying to live a simple life. And that's enough. END.